So this week, the company was due after we had some data analysis talks and some concerns with the data that the company had sent over in both lake change override and open time participation. Then they were due to present the remaining two work rules sections, which, as you remember, we've been waiting on for over 12 months. So the company came with current book, as that's kind of been their only MO throughout this whole thing. And if you remember in Phoenix, we were put on ice because we wanted to talk work rules after the largest meltdown in Southwest Airlines history. The company refused, and we weren't allowed to do that. And so, in anticipation for these 12 months, we've been providing lots and lots of data, lots of supporting information from around the industry with what other people have been achieving. And then the company came in largely with current book, with not much appetite for any change. There's been a lot of speculation about that. What we've seen, the number one source of the disagreements that SWAP has had with the company have been this section, with the additional flying section, with their irregular operations, et cetera. So the company clings to this idea that they need to hold on to past precedent. And to me, that means they want the language to be vague, ambiguous, overextend management rights where they can, and basically leave pilots in doubt of how they're supposed to be paid, what they have to do, what they don't have to do. To date, we're over $13 million in pay errors. So the company doesn't even know how to pay the pilot group correct today, much less the simpler Contract 2020 asks that we put in front of them.
The company UNAIP'd maternity leave and also parental leave. We already had it in the books. It was a paid, really good industry-leading program. And now we're dead last again because they were trying to tie it to sick accrual, which we keep telling them that the market is rising very, very quickly around us, and they cannot wrap their minds around that singular issue. The last pass we had from the company on sick leave, of course, they're trying to tie everything to the accrual. And the accrual, we've heard from the pilots, the accrual cannot change. And so that's the mandate that we've been given, and we have passed that and been very firm with that every time. But they want some kind of trade, a tit for tat, for everything in each realm. And so part of that is benefits, and they were trying to trade sick for STD and LTD, which is what we pay for today through SWAPA. But it's not an even trade because the tide is rising so fast, so rapidly. We just can't touch the accrual, but the benefits, they are almost like compensation. They are rising with the tide.
Yeah, this was a big sticking point today, and why we realized that we don't have a party that's really willing to seriously negotiate at this time. Currently, our fatigue rate is up more than 300% since 2017 and 2018. The company marginalizes that in the room and says it's because pilots aren't accepting extensions, says it's because pilots are doing this to themselves with how they schedule themselves. But the number one cause of fatigue right now is reroute. And the company has no interest in changing their ability to reroute pilots, and that's a big part of what this section is about. So what we heard in the room was, we have a point-to-point network, and we're interested in doing things to fix our network, and yet not a single one in execution came from the company. There's not been one single proposal in execution for the company that would make the pilot experience or even safety be better at Southwest Airlines. 300%. So how long is our head going to be in the sand about execution? In fact, the company has offered in planning, we'll reduce the planned day by 1 hour. What about the executed day? No, can't do that. What are we really saying here? Do we get tired because of a plan, or do we get tired because of a 15-hour executed day? Yeah, that was a frustrating statement made. I mean, I heard one of their more credible members who unfortunately doesn't have the authority to make this deal, but I heard him say in the hallway, it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong, we just have to get the data right. Juxtapose that with their lead negotiator who says, listen, No matter what deal we get, we are going to use our data. So that's a problem. If your data is flawed and full of holes, and we've shown you, and then you just sit there quietly and then follow with that statement, I don't see how we're moving toward a deal. I don't see how we're negotiating in good faith in that scenario. So we showed them, they said that open time participation has gone down. Well, first we had shown them that the unique users has certainly gone down. There's a smaller group picking up a lot more open time, but they showed this really huge hill or mountain, they called it in a graph, of open time and not having bidders. As we started to kind of look through, just spot check, not even looking through all of the pairings that they provided, there were a lot of pairings that had gone out via SNOT-P, via the open time system, which begs the question, if these were awarded through open time, how did they get there without a bidder? The answer is they were, and just silence, no answer. So hopefully they take that back and rerun it. Yeah, to some point. I mean, there was even a little bit of a, blow up 2 weeks ago, I believe. I had mentioned that there's 173 pilots have left in the last year. And Carl said, I'm sick of hearing that. I'm sick of hearing that number. Well, the next day it was 174. It's 182 now. This week it was a different tack. It was, we think half of them came from SkyWest. It's just resume washing. But at $25 million a year an airplane, and if we say it's about 12 pilots per aircraft, how long can we out hire, our deficit? And I know that Bob has openly said, and we'll probably hear about it tomorrow on the earnings call, that we're going to become aircraft limited. But how long is that going to be the case? And is that okay that we just continue to bleed pilots? I mean, we are almost at half the total number that have ever left before the retirement age since 1971. And we continue to just pretend that it's not a major thing.
For us, absolutely. Of course, we don't know what the company data, they haven't shared any of that. They just said that they've recently started doing that. But with our data, absolutely, it's because of the other benefits. It's also the work rules or schedule enhancements that the other airlines are getting that we've introduced and the company will not even entertain.
So we communicated to the NMB that the company continues to just pass current book back and forth. They haven't acknowledged when they have done things that have been what they consider are big moves. Really, they're just coming up to where the industry is, and no real desire to be industry leading anywhere. We're just trying to match the industry as it comes out. And then today's was kind of a big step backwards, a bigger step backwards, arguably, than last week. It wasn't as tacky and ugly as maternity leave, for sure, but it was a big move backwards to say that we're going to go back to the way we've been doing things in a failing operation, and we're not interested in in SWAPA's ideas, or that 95% of our pilots said they need a rewrite in this section specifically. That's a great question. We couldn't reach a deal that acknowledges our pilot group's place in the industry unless we hold firm on this language that's unambiguous, that both of us agree on what it means, that competes in the marketplace fairly with the most productive pilot group in the history of aviation. It is going to slow us down. It is going to slow us down a bit, and that's a shame. We had urged the NMB to have us meet every week, but you have to have two willing partners in order to negotiate. If you have one partner that shows up and says, we're not getting there yet, how do we get to yes? I'm pretty sure there's a book out there called that, but how do we get to yes? Now that's a party that's trying to negotiate, but a party that shows up and just says, meaning the company, that's just not our approach. We're not willing to entertain that. Or my favorite, just no. When we get that, that's not a willing partner. And so that's kind of where we're at. And so we've requested to be released for mediation. We're waiting back to hear from the NMB. There's been lots of turnover and political things going on there. That's where we're at this point. Unless something drastic changes, we're kind of at the point where we're waiting for the NMB's answer. So we're convinced after this week and many other weeks, from the company proposing something last week that had overlap with this section, co-terminals, for instance, and then that didn't appear in this section. And the company asked us, well, you know how this would work, right? It starts and ends the open time at the outstation. I'm like, well, didn't put it in the language, so contract need to follow this, and they're trying to just sort of management rights their way through this. We've kind of reached the conclusion that they're not capable of merging the two documents because they've gone against the NMB's wishes at least 3 times now to merge the documents and use the last copy. So I've instructed the team, scheduling rules. We are going to not entertain any more discussions next week. We're going to wait until we have some supervision by the NMB, since no leadership choose to show up at our meetings. And we are going to combine the documents. We're talking about a shared idea of what this language means and honoring our contracts. So we also began this session. We have 2 goals we would like to be on the same page. The number 1 goal is to stop the bleeding, the exodus of pilots for other airlines. We can't sustain this. The number 2 goal was for us to have a ratifiable deal. It does no good for us if one of the company's negotiators says, hey, we just want to close this up. We don't want to close this up. We want a ratifiable deal that competes for contracts or competes for pilots in the industry and rewards the most productive pilot group in the history of aviation.